police attack a young black man for peacefully protesting, completely unaware of his true identity or the power he holds through his family. They dismiss him as just another protester, someone they can intimidate and silence without any repercussions. What they don't realize is that their actions will set off a series of events they could never have anticipated. Marcus, a passionate and determined young man, is at the heart of the protest. He's driven by a deep sense of justice and a desire to see positive change in his community. His words inspire others to stand with him, but his calm and peaceful approach is misinterpreted by the police as defiance. The officers begin to assert their authority aggressively. They see Marcus not as a person, but as a symbol of resistance that needs to be controlled. Despite Marcus's calm demeanor and logical responses, they grow more hostile, escalating the situation needlessly. Their actions aren't rooted in maintaining order, but in exerting power over someone they believe has none. Marcus warns them that their assumptions are misplaced, but the officers dismiss him entirely, blinded by their bias and arrogance. They assume that no consequences will come from targeting him. They don't realize that Marcus's mother, the mayor, is a powerful advocate for justice and accountability. Her influence and reputation in the city mean that their actions won't remain in the shadows for long. As the situation unfolds, the officers' behavior begins to backfire in ways they could never have predicted. Their lack of professionalism and blatant abuse of power are caught on camera by bystanders, and soon the truth of their actions will be exposed to the public. What happens when those in authority are held accountable for their prejudice and misuse of power? The story takes an unexpected turn, and the consequences are far-reaching. This isn't just a story about one man's courage. It's a reflection of what happens when justice meets accountability. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and stay tuned to see how this story unfolds. A peaceful protest turned into a shocking display of injustice when police officers confronted a young black man standing firmly for his beliefs. What they thought was just another face in the crowd quickly spiraled into something far beyond their control. Their aggressive actions were meant to silence him, but they had no idea who he was, or the powerful ally who was watching everything unfold. This wasn't just about silencing a voice. It was about prejudice, unchecked authority, and a failure to see the truth staring them in the face. These officers thought they could intimidate their way to control, but their actions would soon be exposed in the harshest way possible. The man they targeted wasn't an ordinary protester. He was someone who understood his rights and stood firmly for justice. And while the officers tore through his dignity, they unknowingly set the stage for their own downfall. Every move they made, every word they shouted, was being documented, not just by those in the crowd, but by someone far more influential. As the shocking incident unfolded, the young man stood firm, surrounded by a crowd of protesters who had just witnessed his dignity being trampled upon. The last echo of his words still lingered. "You can silence me, but the truth always comes to light." The police officers, still unaware of the full gravity of their actions, believed the situation was under control. What they didn't know was that their every action was now under the watchful eye of someone who wouldn't rest until justice was served. The protester, Marcus, wasn't just any individual. He was a determined young man, raised with the values of justice and integrity. His calm yet resolute demeanor during the confrontation left a lasting impression on everyone present. What the officers failed to realize was that Marcus's courage stemmed not only from his convictions, but from knowing he had someone powerful in his corner, someone who wouldn't let this injustice go unnoticed. This wasn't the first time Marcus had stood against injustice. Having grown up witnessing systemic inequalities, he became passionate about using his voice to create change. The protest he attended was peaceful, a call for accountability and fairness, but the officers' aggressive actions quickly escalated the situation. Their decision to single out Marcus and treat him with hostility was based on their own prejudices, not facts. As tensions rose, Marcus remained composed, a stark contrast to the officers' growing frustration. They demanded identification, accused him of inciting unrest, and even dismissed his calm attempts to reason with them. Their aggressive posturing and dismissive remarks painted a clear picture of their mindset. They saw Marcus not as an individual, but as a problem to be controlled. Unbeknownst to them, Marcus's mother, Mayor Evelyn Carter, had been closely following the events. A strong advocate for justice and accountability, she had built her career on ensuring equality for all citizens. Watching her son endure this blatant abuse of power fueled her resolve. Evelyn was no stranger to facing opposition, but this was personal. What the officers thought was just another routine show of authority would soon be revealed as a massive error. The truth about Marcus's identity and his connection to Evelyn remained hidden for now, but the stage was set. Evelyn, armed with evidence of the officers' misconduct and her unwavering commitment to justice, was ready to take action. What began as an isolated act of aggression would soon turn into a lesson the entire community and the officers involved would never forget. Marcus's composed defiance in the face of the officers' aggression was more than a display of courage. It was the spark that would ignite a much larger conversation about justice and accountability. As the officers dragged him away, the crowd's murmurs of outrage grew louder. Cell phones were pointed in every direction, capturing every unjust moment. Marcus didn't resist physically, but his unwavering gaze spoke volumes. His parting words still echoed, "You can silence me, but the truth always comes to light." These words reached Evelyn Carter, who, sitting in her office, was reviewing the live footage being shared across social media. The mayor's calm exterior belied the storm building within her. Watching her son, a young man who represented everything she fought for, be treated so unjustly was a deeply personal blow. She knew this wasn't just about Marcus. It was about every person who had faced similar prejudice and abuse. The officers believed they had neutralized the situation, failing to understand that their actions were now under scrutiny, not just by Evelyn, but by an entire community that refused to look away. Marcus's arrest was not the end. It was only the beginning. Evelyn began to assemble her team, knowing this situation required more than outrage. It demanded strategy, evidence, and the courage to expose a flawed system. Evelyn's first step was to contact the precinct. Her voice measured yet firm. She requested immediate access to the arrest report and video footage from the officers' body cameras. At the same time, her legal team began reaching out to witnesses and gathering statements from those who had been present. Evelyn's connections allowed her to move swiftly. But she also knew that the power of the people, those who had captured the injustice on their phones, would be a force no one could ignore. Marcus's identity, still unknown to the officers, remained a pivotal element. They saw him as another young protestor to be silenced, unaware they had targeted the son of a woman with both the power and the determination to bring them to justice. Evelyn didn't rush to reveal the truth. Instead, she focused on ensuring her response was airtight. She knew that exposing systemic issues required careful, deliberate action. Meanwhile, Marcus, sitting in the holding cell, maintained his calm demeanor. He had endured humiliation, but he also understood that his actions had shone a light on an ugly truth. This wasn't just his fight. It was about the countless others who had suffered in silence. His thoughts were interrupted when an officer entered, clearly uneasy as the reality of who Marcus was began to surface. The groundwork had been laid. Evelyn's methodical approach and the strength of Marcus's unwavering courage were coming together to form a response that would not only expose the officer's misconduct, but also send a clear message to everyone watching. The wheels of justice were in motion, and there was no stopping them now. Marcus Carter sat in the holding cell, his mind fixed on the events that had brought him there. Every second was a reminder of the purpose behind his actions. The cold, sterile walls of the cell didn't intimidate him. They only solidified his resolve. Marcus was not the kind of person to back down in the face of injustice, and he had made his stand with the knowledge that it might come to this. What he didn't expect was how far the ripple effect of his arrest would travel. The officers who had arrested Marcus were growing uneasy. Their decision to detain him had been hasty, fueled by bias and the heat of the moment. Now, whispers about Marcus's family ties were making their rounds through the precinct. "Carter, do you think he's related to Mayor Carter?" One officer asked another in a hushed tone. The reply was a nervous shrug. No one wanted to admit it, but the fear was palpable. Meanwhile, Evelyn Carter, the mayor of the city and Marcus's mother, was already in action. She had been informed of her son's arrest, and while her initial reaction was one of anger and heartbreak, she quickly transitioned into her role as a leader. Evelyn was a woman known for her composure and strategic thinking, and she wasn't about to let emotions cloud her judgment. She requested the full details of Marcus's arrest, including reports, footage, and witness accounts. Evelyn wasn't just acting as a mother seeking justice for her son. She was acting as a mayor, determined to confront systemic issues head-on. Evelyn's office became a hive of activity as her team worked tirelessly to gather evidence. Social media was buzzing with videos of the protest and Marcus's arrest. Clips showed Marcus standing peacefully, holding a sign, and speaking calmly with the crowd around him. In stark contrast, the footage revealed the officers' aggressive behavior, their unnecessary use of force, and the blatant bias in their words. The evidence left little room for doubt. Marcus had done nothing to warrant such treatment. Back at the precinct, the realization that Marcus Carter was no ordinary protester was setting in. The officers who had mistreated him were now grappling with the consequences of their actions. One officer, visibly uneasy, approached Marcus in his cell. "Your name is Carter?" he asked hesitantly. Marcus looked up, his expression calm but piercing. "Yes, Marcus Carter." The officer's face betrayed his growing fear. He walked away without another word, the weight of what they had done sinking in. Evelyn knew this was no time for half measures. She decided to hold a press conference, a move that would put the issue in the public spotlight. Standing in front of a room full of reporters and cameras, Evelyn exuded a calm authority that commanded attention. She began by addressing the broader issue of systemic bias and abuse of power. "What happened to this young man," she said, her voice steady but emotional, "is not an isolated incident. It reflects deeper flaws within our system that must be addressed." Without revealing Marcus's identity, Evelyn detailed the mistreatment he had faced and emphasized the importance of accountability. "No one," she said firmly, "should ever fear being targeted for standing up for what they believe in. This is not just about one person, it's about ensuring fairness and justice for everyone." The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Evelyn's words struck a chord with people from all walks of life. The story gained national attention, with media outlets highlighting the footage of Marcus's arrest and Evelyn's impassioned plea for change. Hashtags demanding justice for Marcus and calling for police reform trended across social media platforms. The pressure on the precinct grew exponentially, and the officers involved found themselves at the center of a storm they couldn't escape. Inside the precinct, the tension was palpable. The officers involved in Marcus's arrest were now subject to intense scrutiny. Senior officials began reviewing their actions, and it became clear that their behavior was indefensible. The weight of public opinion, combined with Evelyn's leadership, had turned the tide against them. Marcus, still in his cell, remained calm despite the chaos unfolding outside. He knew his mother was fighting for him, but more importantly, he knew this moment was bigger than him. This wasn't just about his own treatment. It was about challenging a system that allowed such injustices to occur. Marcus's resolve to stand firm became a source of inspiration for many who saw his story. Evelyn's press conference became the catalyst for broader action. The evidence her team had gathered was undeniable, and the demand for accountability grew louder by the hour. The precinct had no choice but to release Marcus, and when he walked out of the holding cell, he was greeted by a crowd of supporters. Cheers erupted as people celebrated his release, but Marcus's mind was already on the next steps. Evelyn met Marcus outside the precinct, her face a mixture of relief and determination. "This is just the beginning," she said, embracing him. Marcus nodded, knowing she was right. Together, they had sparked a movement that was gaining momentum. The fight was far from over, but Marcus and Evelyn were ready to face whatever came next. This wasn't just about justice for one man. It was about changing the narrative and holding those in power accountable for their actions. Marcus Carter walked out of the precinct with his mother, Mayor Evelyn Carter, by his side. The crowd outside erupted into cheers, but Marcus's mind wasn't on the celebration. He knew this moment was only the beginning. Despite his release, the pain of the injustice he had endured weighed heavily on him. His mother's unwavering presence reminded him that they were in this fight together, but the road ahead would require more than just public support. It would demand accountability and systemic change. Evelyn Carter's determination only grew stronger after seeing her son walk free. She knew the fight wasn't just about Marcus. It was about every person who had faced similar mistreatment, but didn't have the resources or voice to fight back. As a mayor, she had power, but as a mother, she had purpose. Evelyn's next steps were clear. Expose the truth, hold those responsible accountable, and push for meaningful reforms. The media frenzy surrounding Marcus's release was impossible to ignore. The footage of his arrest continued to circulate, sparking debates on news channels and social media platforms. Evelyn knew that momentum was on their side, but she also understood that public attention could be fleeting. She immediately began organizing a strategy to ensure the movement didn't lose steam. Back at home, Marcus sat with his mother and her team, discussing their next moves. Despite the challenges he had faced, Marcus spoke with a calm and thoughtful demeanor. "This isn't just about me," he said, his voice steady. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through this." Evelyn nodded, proud of her son's resolve. She outlined a plan to launch an independent investigation into the precinct where Marcus had been detained. The investigation would focus not only on his case, but also on uncovering any patterns of misconduct. As the investigation began, more stories emerged from others who had experienced similar mistreatment. People felt empowered to come forward, sharing their own encounters with systemic bias and abuse of power. These testimonies became a powerful tool for Evelyn and her team, highlighting the urgent need for reform. Evelyn made it clear in her public addresses that the goal wasn't to vilify all officers, but to ensure accountability for those who misused their authority. Meanwhile, the officers involved in Marcus's arrest faced increasing scrutiny. Internal Affairs launched a formal review, and it became clear that their actions were part of a larger pattern of misconduct within the department. Evelyn's team worked tirelessly to ensure transparency throughout the process. Every detail of the investigation was made public, keeping the community informed and engaged. Evelyn also reached out to local activists and community leaders, fostering partnerships to amplify their shared goals. Together, they organized town hall meetings where residents could voice their concerns and offer solutions. These meetings became a space for open dialogue, bridging the gap between the community and law enforcement. Evelyn's leadership in these efforts demonstrated her commitment to unity and change. As the investigation unfolded, Marcus used his platform to advocate for justice and reform. He gave interviews, attended rallies, and spoke at community events, always emphasizing the importance of accountability and systemic change. His story resonated with people far beyond his city, inspiring similar movements in other communities. Marcus's calm demeanor and thoughtful words made him a powerful voice for change. The pressure on the precinct continued to mount. Senior officials were forced to acknowledge the flaws in their system, and several officers resigned or were reassigned. Evelyn's push for reform extended beyond the immediate case, including proposals for new policies that emphasized transparency, accountability, and community involvement in policing. When the investigation concluded, the findings were damning. The report detailed systemic failures within the precinct, from biased policing practices to inadequate training and oversight. Evelyn held another press conference to address the findings, her tone resolute. "We cannot move forward without acknowledging the truth," she said. "This is not just about one case. It's about building a system that serves and protects everyone equally." The reforms that followed were sweeping. The precinct implemented mandatory bias training for officers, established an independent oversight committee, and launched programs to strengthen community relations. These changes were just the beginning, but they marked a significant step toward rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the community. For Marcus, the journey was deeply personal. He had been thrust into the spotlight because of an injustice, but he chose to use that platform to make a difference. His relationship with his mother grew stronger as they worked together, united by their shared purpose. The fight for justice had tested their strength, but it also revealed their resilience and determination. As Marcus and Evelyn reflected on everything they had accomplished, they knew the work wasn't done. The system still had flaws, and the fight for equality was far from over. But they also knew that change was possible when people came together to demand it. Their journey became a symbol of hope and perseverance, inspiring others to stand up for what was right. Marcus Carter's journey had sparked a wave of change, but he knew the movement was only as strong as the momentum it could maintain. As the precinct faced reforms and the public celebrated the first steps of accountability, Marcus and Mayor Evelyn Carter turned their focus to a larger goal, ensuring that the systemic issues revealed during the investigation could not continue elsewhere. Their mission wasn't about punishing a few. It was about transforming the system for good. The findings of the investigation into the precinct had been conclusive, highlighting patterns of misconduct, bias, and a lack of oversight. Evelyn made a commitment to expand these findings into actionable changes that would affect not just her city, but set a precedent for others. In her speeches, she emphasized the importance of looking beyond this one case, calling on other leaders to review their own departments and systems. Her words carried weight, as her own son's ordeal symbolized the consequences of unchecked power. Marcus, despite the challenges he had faced, remained a steady and calm presence in the public eye. He attended community meetings, spoke at rallies, and became a visible advocate for justice. His story had inspired many, but he made it clear that this wasn't about him alone. It was about creating a future where no one had to endure what he did. He often said, "Change isn't just a moment, it's a movement, and movements don't stop when the cameras do." Evelyn's leadership continued to be the backbone of the effort. With her team, she began drafting policies that focused on accountability, transparency, and building trust between law enforcement and the community. She worked closely with legal experts, activists, and even members of law enforcement who supported reform. One of her proposals included creating a citywide independent oversight committee that would handle complaints against officers and conduct regular audits of police activity. As these plans developed, Evelyn also prioritized connecting with the community. She hosted listening sessions, inviting residents to share their experiences and ideas for improvement. At these sessions, the stories shared often mirrored Marcus's, accounts of bias, unnecessary force, and fear. Evelyn listened intently, using these personal accounts to shape her approach. She reminded the attendees that their voices mattered, not just in shaping policy, but in holding leaders accountable. Meanwhile, Marcus focused on youth engagement. He visited schools and community centers, speaking to young people about the importance of standing up for what's right and working to create a fairer world. He wanted them to know that they had a role in shaping the future. His calm yet passionate demeanor made him an inspiring figure for many, and his message resonated far beyond his city. The media continued to follow Marcus and Evelyn's efforts, bringing national attention to the systemic changes they were advocating for. Their story became a symbol of resilience, courage, and the power of community. As Evelyn worked tirelessly to implement reforms, Marcus ensured that the public remained engaged and informed. Together, they formed a powerful team, driven by a shared purpose. Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Some within the police department resisted the changes, arguing that they were unnecessary or too extreme. Evelyn faced criticism from certain groups who claimed she was undermining law enforcement. But she remained firm, reminding everyone that accountability and justice were not anti-police. They were pro-community. Evelyn's persistence began to yield tangible results. The Oversight Committee was established, officers underwent mandatory training on bias and de-escalation, and recruitment standards were revised to emphasize community-oriented policing. These reforms sent a clear message. The system would no longer tolerate abuse of power or neglect of duty. Marcus and Evelyn's combined efforts inspired other cities to take similar actions. Their story became a blueprint for addressing systemic issues, showing that change was possible when leaders and communities worked together. Activists across the country cited their work as evidence that perseverance and collaboration could yield results. In the months that followed, the city saw improvements in its relationship with law enforcement. Reports of misconduct decreased. Trust between the community and the police grew, and people began to feel safer and more supported. Evelyn often said, "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. We've started something, but it's up to all of us to keep it going." Marcus remained a vocal advocate, but he also began to step back from the spotlight, focusing on his personal life and continuing to engage with the community in quieter ways. His resilience and calm determination left a lasting impression on those he had inspired. To him, the movement was never about fame or recognition. It was about making a difference. As Evelyn and Marcus reflected on their journey, they felt a deep sense of purpose. They knew that the work they had done had made an impact. But they also knew there was still more to achieve. They were determined to keep fighting for justice, not just for their city, but as a model for others. Their story was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, change was possible when people came together with courage, persistence, and hope. Marcus Carter's quiet determination to create meaningful change inspired his city, but his journey wasn't over. As the reforms led by Mayor Evelyn Carter gained momentum, the focus shifted to ensuring lasting accountability. The newly formed Oversight Committee, designed to monitor police activity and handle complaints, marked a critical step in rebuilding trust. Community members began to see results as officers engaged more positively, misconduct declined, and transparency became the norm. However, the process wasn't without its hurdles. Within the department, resistance to change lingered. Some officers clung to outdated practices, and a few sought to undermine Evelyn's efforts. Marcus understood the importance of keeping the community engaged. He met with local leaders, attended public events, and encouraged open dialogue. His message remained consistent. Real change required persistence and unity. Evelyn's leadership continued to inspire confidence. She worked to expand training programs, focused on de-escalation and bias, and implemented a system to reward officers who exemplified community-oriented policing. These changes were accompanied by educational campaigns aimed at helping residents understand their rights and the role of law enforcement. The city's progress drew national attention. Other leaders sought Evelyn's advice on implementing similar reforms, and Marcus's advocacy became a model for citizen engagement. While the road was challenging, the results were clear. Bridges were being built and trust was being restored. Evelyn often reflected on how far they'd come. She said, "This isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about building something stronger." Marcus shared her vision, believing the story of their city could inspire others to fight for justice. Though challenges remained, the commitment of Evelyn, Marcus, and the community served as a powerful example of resilience and hope. Together, they showed that even in the face of deep divisions, positive change was possible through determination and unity.